Hello, 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 and welcome to the Upside Podcast, the first podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Eric Hornung, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. Podcast Pro himself, Jay Klaus. Jay, it's always great to be on the mics with a podcast pro.
That's right. Yeah, launched a new course called Podcast Like the Pros, which Eric is alluding to. My most successful course launch to date. And Eric, I don't think there's any denying anymore that I am an educator.
We've been saying it on the podcast for like 3 years now.
7 LinkedIn learning courses, including a course on raising capital, which just released. 3 podcasting courses. And this course, that's 11 courses I've produced in the last 3 years.
That's like how many courses you go to, and that's a lot of courses. I don't think most college teachers put out that many.
You can get a degree by just following my courses.
What would that degree be in?
Bullshit. No, it's a degree in, I cover product management. I cover freelancing. I cover small business and raising capital. I guess entrepreneurship.
There you go. An entrepreneurship major at the Klaus School of Business.
At the Klaus School of Business. Yeah. And you know, when I went to college, the one thing I told myself I would not do is become a teacher, because that's what my parents did. They are both high school educators. My dad taught woodworking and computer-aided drafting. My mom taught English and had a little bit of experience with AP English. And speaking of AP classes, Eric, today we're going back into the archives, and we're going to an episode that aired on March 11th, 2020, episode 68 with Amanda DoAmaral, the CEO of Fiveable. But to give a little insight into how Eric and I typically end the year, we usually stockpile interviews, and we actually talked to Amanda on November 11th, 2019. The recording of this episode you're about to listen didn't air for 4 months after that because we were so far ahead, and Amanda just kept raising money.
She just kept on. She got the upside bump before she even went on upside.
Yeah, the upside bump. When we talked with her in November of 2019, she had about $140,000 in funding from Beta Boom and Generator. And since that time, she's raised $3.8 million in funding in total. And how does that break down?
It breaks down into, holy cow. You know how like some businesses, COVID hit and they just were struggling? This is the opposite. This is the accelerant based on this business model. But looking back specifically at who's invested in how, we have Matchstick Ventures, BBG Ventures, Cream City Venture Capital, our friends at SoGal, and there are like 20 different investors on this cap table, which is unique, I think, for companies that we see on Upside.
Fiveable is an online streaming and content platform helping high school students study and master their AP exams, if that was not obvious or if you do not recall. They offer live and pre-recorded videos, study guides, and community building resources. Amanda herself taught in Oakland as a Teach for America teacher and started Fiveable as a way to help her old students who needed guidance studying for their AP exams. I love this. I think, we've only seen an acceleration in the future of education and online learning. I think Amanda was ahead of the curve and very well deserved to see her raise this amount of money. Eric, we actually met Amanda in person pretty recently.
Well, maybe it feels recently because we've only taken one trip in 2020. But
that's true. That's true. It feels
it was on our last trip. It was on our last trip. So
every week of the last 9 months feels the same. So it feels recent. But yeah, I guess it was all the way back in CES times, back in January. Oh my gosh. It does feel recent, but
it was a full year ago. She was pitching at the New Voices pitch competition, and she absolutely crushed it. And it's another one of those where we get to meet somebody in person, and I love when that happens.
Amanda, I remember from this interview, and especially meeting her in person, just a very down-to-earth, grounded person who tells it like it is, and could not be happier to see her success and what she's been able to do since being on the podcast. So excited to dive into this episode.
So we'd like to hear what you have to say about Fiveable, about the trend that they're on, about education in general in this COVID and post-COVID world. Hit us up at Upside FM on Twitter, or if you have something a little longer, hello@upside.fm. Rewind.
Some former students reached out to me. They were taking AP US history. I had them in 9th and 10th grade, and they were freaking out. Like, our teacher's not supporting us. We haven't written any essays. A lot of just like a lot of stress. And so they were like, I know you're not in Oakland, but can you help us? And so that's when I started live streaming for them.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside. Woo!
Hello, and welcome to the Upside Podcast, the first podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Eric Hornung, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. New Desk himself, Jay Klaus. Jay, it is a wild and exciting time to be furniture of yours, because it is new.
It is new, wild and exciting time being furniture created by my dad. My dad is a carpenter, a former industrial arts teacher, but now that he's retired, he likes to make furniture for his friends and especially family. And I decided it was time to do away with this shoddy old desk that I've had since I moved into this apartment and ask my dad to build something custom. And I am excited about it. It is both a seated and standing desk.
Wow.
But not the way you may expect. It is not hydraulic. It's completely made out of wood.
Okay, so help me understand that.
So the top of it has a compartment that has pressurized arms that I can lift up, and it expands upward.
That's pretty cool.
And I can push it back down. That's also a drawer inside of those arms. So I've got a big drawer in the middle. I've got 3 drawers on the left-hand side. I can sit, I can stand, I can affix my podcast microphone to it. It's really something.
So are you going to be doing standing podcasts from now on?
That might actually happen. I haven't tried it yet, but that's not a bad idea.
I wonder if you'll be a different host when you're standing.
I feel like I might, I don't know, maybe the energy will be higher. Maybe I'll have more body movement. I kind of bounce when I talk anyway. I don't know if you noticed, but like when I ask questions, I bounce a lot. And maybe when I'm standing, that will be less. Or maybe I'll be even more energetic. I don't want to get further away from the microphone. That's the danger.
Right, and if you're bouncing, and then when you're standing, that's jumping, all of a sudden you're going to be like up and down away from the microphone. We're going to get some varying J tones. One piece of furniture I do love that your dad made that I've seen is the, what would you call it, a liquor cabinet? What would you call that?
Yeah, I'd call it a bar. It's definitely, I guess a liquor cabinet is probably a good way to put it, but it also has a wine rack. It can hold wine glasses. Yeah, he built the bar. He built my bed platform that has giant drawers in it so I could replace my dresser. He is legitimately the best craftsman that I've ever met.
Has he ever taught you how to do any of this stuff, or have you just not learned?
That's one of my greatest regrets growing up, is that what he didn't do was force me to learn anything, because he was supportive of what I wanted to do. But I wish I was more interested as a kid to learn some of this, because I don't know much of any of it. And now when we make things, I want to be more involved in it, but living 2 hours away, like I wanted this desk to be a project for both of us to work on together, but without traveling 2 hours, I couldn't be there to make it. I just kind of designed it and said, this is what I'm thinking, and pick out the handles and the finish and all that.
And you don't have like a workshop in your little tiny apartment there, so you can't just like FaceTime him and be like, teach me how to do this.
Yeah, I barely have a living room in my little tiny apartment here.
Well, it would be nice if you could live stream with your dad, but for today, maybe instead we will just talk about live streaming with our guest.
Today we are talking with another former teacher and current teacher, actually, Amanda DoAmaral. Amanda is the founder and CEO of Fiveable, which is a social learning platform that offers live, in-depth group teaching and learning sessions after school for students and educators. Specifically, they focus on AP exam teaching right now, connecting students with teachers, teachers with students, and teachers with teachers through live streamed lessons, interactive discussions, and engaging communities.
You know, when studying for the CFA, we kind of go through this as well, where it's a live stream once a week type thing for studying for the CFA, just to make sure you're on track. So I kind of have a little bit of first-person insight into what something like this might look like.
I'm really interested to learn more about the live streaming component.
I kind of live in the world of online education and specifically pre-recorded videos with the work that I do at LinkedIn Learning and on my own at Freelancing School. But I've never thought about live streaming as like the offering for online education. And it's a different form factor. I think it would probably connect better with today's young audience, this Gen Z audience that Fiveable is probably approaching. So yeah, I'm excited to learn more about it. It was founded in 2018. They're based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They've gone through the Generator Accelerator, friends of the podcast, Generator. So another look at Milwaukee, Eric.
What's the generation after Gen Z called?
I think we start over back at A, or maybe we do double A.
Generation double A?
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's what we'll run with until we're corrected. So listeners, if you know what the generation after Gen Z is called, send us a tweet at UpsideFM. Or if you have something a little longer based on this episode, you can send us an email at hello@upside.fm. And we will get to that interview right after this.
This episode of Upside is sponsored by Tresta. Tresta is a mobile app that lets you do business calling and texting from anywhere. With Tresta, you can set up your business phone number, download the app, and start calling and texting unlimited right away. Tresta is the best business phone app on the market, whether you're a founder or freelancer just starting your business, or you're already established. Growing your network and your business is all about communication. You've got to be available no matter where you are. Tresta offers the call management features that empower you to communicate smarter and more efficiently, like auto attendance, call recording, user groups, and more. And you don't need any special equipment either, just the smartphone you're already using. Tresta is easy to configure, so you can set everything up yourself, all online. It's just $15 per user per month with no contract, so start your free 30-day trial today at tresta.com/upside. That's www.tresta.com/upside. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Good. Thanks for having me.
On Upside, we'd like to start with a background of the guest. So can you tell us about the history of Amanda?
History of Amanda. So let me go back. I was a teacher in Oakland. I made my way out to Oakland through Teacher America, and I was originally from Boston. And so as I started teaching in Oakland, I was like super young, and none of us really knew what we were doing because, you know, TFA's preparation is questionable. But man, did we like do everything we could for our students. And so I spent 5 years at Skyline High School in Oakland, and it was just like completely life-changing in a lot of ways. The decision that I made to leave my classroom was heartbreaking for me. And it was mostly based on just like, I just couldn't cut it anymore, like financially and mentally and physically. And so I left the classroom, went out and traveled for a while, about like a one-way ticket, and just kept going east until I got back home to where my mom lives in Maine. And then I worked on a political campaign for a little while in upstate New York. And this was all just like in the span of 1 year. And then it was at that point that I had some former students reaching out to me asking for help with AP classes. And so that brought me to start Fiveable. And so kind of went from classroom teacher to Nomad to campaign finance fellow, like making cold calls, to screw it, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to move back home and see what happens.
Did you always want to be a teacher growing up?
Kind of. I mean, I feel like when I was in college, I switched to study education because I was originally studying like history and more of the like liberal arts. And I figured maybe there's some more practical thing I can get out of these 4 years. And I really I had a job as a camp counselor in high school that I just really liked going to. And so when I really thought about like, what do I want to do when I grow up? Like, I just was like, I just want to enjoy going to work. Like, that's the biggest thing. And so switching into study education made a lot of sense. Even though I was studying it, I wasn't sure that I was actually going to be a teacher, but the opportunity was there, and I knew that I would like it, you know? And so I figured, let me just take the risk. And it was super scary at first. The biggest thing that was scary was just the, like, you know, you're basically on stage every day for students. And that kind of like just being on all the time took a lot. I had to build a lot of like confidence in myself to just like own it and like really be a big part of it.
Can you talk about what preparation you wish you would have had going into TFA, or what felt like it was lacking?
Yeah, it's funny. I I studied education. And so I was in the social studies education program at Boston University. And we spent, I don't know, all 4 years just like trash talking TFA. That's just like what happens in education programs, because how could you learn in 7 weeks what we're learning in 4 years? And so there was just this like inherent like rivalry. And of course, the recruiters showed up senior year, and I was like, I don't want any part of this. And then I decided to take the meeting just to like just to give this woman a piece of my mind, honestly. And then somehow led myself down to like, all right, maybe I'll just apply. I'll just see what happens. And then that kind of just kept going. And so when I finally got in, I just was like, let me go be like behind enemy lines for a minute. Like I did the traditional route. Let me see what this actually looks like before I decide this isn't it. And what I think we learned the most, and I say we because a lot of us, what I didn't anticipate is that everybody going in was sort of questioning it too, except for like a handful of people that had just been like, chugging Kool-Aid for years. Most of us realized that there's too many factors at play. Teachers are generally not very good in their first year because it's just really hard. It's a lot of like on the job, practice that you need. And so no matter, even for me, my 4 years at BU wasn't super like preparing me for what it actually felt like to be in the classroom of, 30 ninth graders. It just like there was disconnect, right? And so for me, the things I learned the most were actually in my classroom. Like it took me like 3-4 years to actually feel like, okay, I know what is expected of me. I know how to handle these situations. And so for TFA, it's a 2-year program. They can't really admit that teachers just aren't super good in their first year. You might show signs of being good, but this is not easy. 2 years is just not enough to like create good teachers. You can create there's people that are just good at this because this is what I don't know. Out of 2 years, you can find out who's going to be good in their third year. But 2 years, we all were just kind of young and just kind of hoping every day that we wouldn't get laughed out.
You said the decision to leave the classroom was heartbreaking for you. Talk to us about what your life was like then, why you were even considering leaving in the first place, and what that decision was like.
So there was like a lot of factors in it. The way that it kind of was while we were teaching, it always felt like week to week, month to month, year to year, just deciding I still want to do this. And the reason for that is because it put a lot of stress on me. And I was like in a lot of ways. Like I was dealing with my student loans, which I couldn't reconsolidate because I didn't make enough money to do that. I had like credit card debt, just like the usual. Plus I was teaching in Oakland where the cost of living is just like outrageous. And so that was a big piece of it, is I just had to kind of ask myself, like, this is not like a financially good decision for me to stay. If I want to come back or if I want to get another teaching job, that's fine. But like right now, I'm just like getting a paycheck and pushing it all towards these other costs. And then there was the other layer of this too, of like at my school in particular, things were kind of frustrating because there was always a lot of turnover with administration. And so teachers like were constantly working to figure out, in like lead meetings or planning meetings, like, how do we make this better? And it felt like every school year we had to start over. Like we would be in a room, we would be like putting initiatives together, but ultimately like every good thing that happened at the school was tied to the person that did it. And as soon as that person would leave, we would have to start over. And that made me feel like I was crazy. And so that was another huge layer of it, of like, I can't commit to this anymore. Like, I feel like I'm just spinning in a wheel. And so let me just walk away and see what happens. And that was basically the big decision. And telling my students that like the day that I like told them was just like, it was the worst. It was just so like sad. Because they felt so much, they felt it from so many other teachers too. And so it just really sucked to have to do that to them.
How much time are you putting in outside of classes, like building relationships with students?
Oh, a lot. I mean, for me, it's funny because like one of the first things that some of the kids said was like where am I going to eat lunch now? Because in my classroom, like the door was always open. Like the whole campus had lunch at the same time. And so I just used lunch as a time when like there's no reason for me to like shut the door and have my own space unless it was just like a day where I was like, leave me alone. But for the most part, before school, during lunch, in between classes, during classes, like all of it was about relationship building. After school, I did some different things with the theater program, with softball. So like I tried to get involved in different ways, but I really built a lot of good relationships with students because it just was a lot like that was sort of my teaching style is like, if I build a good relationship, then there's a lot more trust. There's a lot more just like they're more okay being vulnerable. Like if they need help, you're only okay asking for help if you trust the person that you're asking. And so that was a really important piece of it for me in my classroom.
So most people, when they have a little nomad period or a nomad year, it's because they've saved up some money and they're like, all right, I'm just going to go do this travel thing. You said you had student loans, you had credit card debt, you're in a bad financial position. That's a big driver. And then you just decide to get on an airplane. Can you talk about that decision, where you went, and just like what you learned on that experience?
Yeah. So what I did is like when I made the decision to leave the classroom, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so I saved for like 6 months, but it was like it was tiny savings. And so I also knew that traveling was not a good financial decision, but I was like, why not? I had traveled a lot before and I just had got kind of good at the like budget travel. And so, cheap flights, just staying in hostels. I don't know. I just like I felt this like bug to go and I just figured like, well, I guess I kind of like just kind of leaned on some of my like privilege, like I just figured like I may as well go and I'll see if I can make an income while I'm gone, which didn't really pan out in any of the ways that I tried, but I just knew that I could always go back home. And so that was what made me just keep going. And I knew that I could come back and get a job, and so I just was like, screw it, I'm going to go. And I just bought a ticket by myself the cheapest ticket I found was from Providence to Edinburgh, and it was $94. And so it was like wildly cheap. And so I was like, let's go. And I actually spent less money while I was traveling than I did in like the same 3 months the year before as a teacher.
What's it like working on a political campaign?
Yeah, it was really fun. So while I was traveling, I was in Nepal, and I just had this like moment of like I was going to all the things and I wasn't really like appreciating it anymore. I was just kind of like going through the motions. And part of the reason, actually, it was right after the Vegas shooting that I just felt like things are falling apart here. My story can't be that I was just like, I was about to go to Thailand. And so I was like, I can't just be like drunk on a beach in Thailand. Like, I need to get in the fight. And so I found a fellowship on a congressional campaign in New York 19th District. I had no idea like really what I was getting myself into. And essentially what we did is we were campaign finance fellows. And so we were raising money. We were doing a lot of cold calls. But the campaign itself taught me a lot about what the structures of campaigns look like, what it was like to work around people who were just tied to a movement, above anything else. And it also, I had never really come into contact with what like raising money just by like cold calling was like. But I lived in a house with people, like with all the other fellows, and that kind of there was a lot of influence from that experience that came into my Fiveable experience.
What is raising money on cold calls like? What do people need to hear to say, yeah, I'll donate to a campaign?
I don't know what the secret sauce is. The whole thing was wild to me. Like we would go through all these lists of people that had donated to others before. That whole fact that you could just like see where everyone's donated, that was mind blowing to me. Like I just didn't know about like open secrets or like this is all just public information. And so then it made sense. Okay, well then if you find people that donate to this person and this person, then maybe they're willing to donate to your candidate. And you'd have all these lists and we would just start calling. And most people were like, wouldn't answer or wanted nothing to do with us. But it would just like totally shake me. The people who you would get on the phone would talk to the candidate for the first time. And in that call would hand over like $8,000. And I was like, how much money do these people have that they can just like, oh yeah, he sounds good. Like, let me just send that over. I don't know. I mean, I think that they really needed to, no matter what level that they were going to contribute, they really just needed to hear something connected to them, right? Like, this candidate sounds like me, or I believe that he's going to support people like me. Like, I think that was the real, like, that was the important piece of it.
So you leave the political campaign world and you get these calls and you talk to us about the start of Fiveable.
Yeah. So as I was doing all this cold calling, I just kind of knew that like I didn't really want to do this. And so I started thinking about like kind of what do I know? What do I know how to do? What do I want to do? Just started being kind of more reflective. And around the same time, some former students reached out to me. They were taking APUSH, AP US history. I had them in 9th and 10th grade and they were freaking out. Like, our teacher's not supporting us. We haven't written any essays, a lot of just like a lot of stress. And so they were like, I know you're not in Oakland, but can you help us? And so that's when I started live streaming for them. And then I got to a point around January where I was like, I think there's something here. I like working with students. I like supporting AP classes. I'm not sure what any of this is going to look like yet, but I kind of want to take a shot on it. And so I decided to leave the campaign. It was kind of a power move on the campaign because they were ready to offer me like a full-time job. And I was like, nope, I'm good. I'm going to take no pay and move back in with my mom and like see if I can build something. So it was just another like massive risk in that year. And so I moved back home and just kind of got to work, started building a website, started creating content, started learning about marketing and business, just like all of it, and kept teaching my own students. And so what we eventually started doing is like, all right, well, if my students wanted these live streams, then I bet other students would want them as well. And that's what really that's how it really all got started.
Were you like live streaming on Twitch, or like how were you actually like mechanically doing this?
Yeah, I just did it on like a webinar platform. So then I was using a webinar platform called Demio. And it really wasn't until April that we really started taking off. It took a while to sort of lay a lot of the groundwork for things. And I had like kind of moved towards, well, if you have these questions, let me start pre-recording things. And so I kind of moved a little bit away from live streams to pre-recorded, like made a lot of YouTube videos, tried to get like I also recorded like a bunch of other videos in sort of like an online course format. And then just couldn't get that to like really push in. And so I went back to the live streams. I had users telling me what they want. And then I was like kind of changing things up a little bit. And then I just kind of went back to what they wanted. And so by April, I started live streaming, still on Demio, and just really sharing the link, like pushing the link out on like Reddit and Discord and in Facebook groups. And that's when we started getting a lot of students from like all over the place.
Since then, you've raised some money. Is that right?
Yeah, I have. So what happened is that April and May, that AP season, we had more than 2,000 kids watching the streams. We had signed up. Oh man, I don't even remember how many had like paid for streams then, a couple hundred. And I had gotten this Google ad for an accelerator. And I didn't know what an accelerator was. I'd never heard of it. And I just was like, well, let me just apply. Let me see what happens. Like, I have no idea if I'm in the right stage for this. And that was the Beta Boom Accelerator. And they gave me a shot. And they saw something in me and what I was building. And so that was the first money that like Fiveable raised, right? And so that was the summer of 2018. So I spent like 6 or 7 weeks in Utah. I had a friend come with me, help me build. And that was really like laying a lot of the basics, like learning about pitching and raising money and just learning to become a startup rather than just like a small business kind of.
How are you describing Fiveable then? Did it even have a name? And how would you describe it today?
It did have a name then. I called it Fiveable then. That was a name that actually my mom had come up with. And so I was like, she's funny. She was sort of my first like advisor in all of this, just supportive. But the way that I was describing it then was really about It was just I'm trying to remember. It was really about like supporting AP students. It was less about the product side. I mean, I still would talk about the fact that we were live, but it was much more just about AP is an issue because college competition and cost is an issue. And so AP is going to keep going up, but their support is not always there. Let's create something to support APs. Over the summer, I really needed to find a way. Actually, I think by the end of the summer, I was still pitching really that. And it wasn't until this last spring, so spring of 2019, that we sort of transitioned into thinking about like a wider lens. Like, what does live streaming do for education beyond APs? Thinking about ourselves as, I mean, really, like we were thinking about ourselves as like the Twitch of education. And so how do we leverage not just like live streaming, but also like social aspects of like what kids are used to on social media and tie in learning to that. And so that's where we are now.
Why do you think that the live aspect is what is resonating and making Fiveable work for your learners versus pre-recorded video?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough because like kids are busy. And so that's sort of the thing we come up against. But every time a student makes time to go to a live stream, we see so much like positive growth just in that 1 hour or less, where like students are really like, they find ways to, they're asking questions, they're interacting with each other, they're pushing the way that the lesson is taught. Even like we might show up and say, let's cover this topic, and the kids are like, okay, we get this half, but can you really focus on the second half? And that's not possible in the like pre-recorded space. You know, all those videos that I recorded for like an online course are also totally outdated already. Like all the AP exams changed this year. And so that's led to a lot of stress for a lot of teachers. And because we're live, we can like really adapt in the moment and continue to explain things in different ways.
So you're not the only producer of content anymore, right?
No. So it used to be that I was just teaching 2 subjects. Last year, we brought on a small team. There was 5 of us that were streaming 7 different topics. And then this year, now we really expanded. So now we've got 15 subjects and 95 streamers that stream throughout the month. And so really just a huge group of students and teachers that nobody's streaming as much as like we used to, as each streamer used to last year. So everyone streams a little bit less, but there's a lot more people involved. And so we get a lot of different lenses on the content. So sometimes like the teachers will support things, but other times it's students that will bring in their 2 cents.
How did you expand from 5 people teaching to 95 people teaching in a year?
So when I first started, like those 5 people that I hired last year, the intention was for them to be lead teachers and to essentially like operate as almost like department chairs, right? Like you are the lead for psychology, and then you will have a team that you'll manage. But last year, I just never got to the next step. And so I just wasn't able to, I'd hired all these lead teachers and then I was never able to like give them a team. And so at the end of the school year, as like AP started picking up, we just started testing, like, what if we let more people stream? And that really helped because the more streams we had, the more content we were creating and the more students were engaging. And so going into this school year, we just decided to go with that same model, but actually like build it out. And so figure out a way for it all to work. So we hired 14 lead teachers. One of them has 2 subjects. That's like the calculus one. And then started hiring teams for them of students and teachers that they could then manage. And so the biggest way that we were able to do it was really just about sharing sort of the management of it. So I'm not managing 95 people, I can manage 14, and then they handle a lot of the scheduling and operations for everybody else.
What's the incentive for these? Do you call them teachers? Do you call them streamers?
Yeah, we call them streamers because they're both teachers and students.
Okay. What's the incentive for these streamers?
Yeah. What's interesting is like there is an obvious like side gig incentive, right? Like they're looking for just like making a little bit of extra money. So we do pay them for the streams. But what I've learned from all of them is that they are not truly incentivized by the extra pay. They are incentivized by wanting to help more students. For teachers, it's like they think about just like expanding their own classroom. Like a lot of the teachers that we have as streamers, some of them are like on YouTube, some of them are on Teachers Pay Teachers. It's like they've been sort of sharing things for a while, and this just gives them another platform to expand that access. For students, they really just want to help each other. They know how hard it is and want to show other kids like how they've done it. I know it's one of those things that like even at the beginning of the school year, I was like, okay, but they're gonna just like want to make extra money. Like that has to be their biggest thing. But every step of the way, every time I've talked to them of like, why are you doing this? Nobody mentions like making extra money as their first reason. This is like, they really just want to like support other students. How do we reach more students is like what their driving factor is.
Is the financial model though on that side to like Twitch where it's, I have 2,000 view this stream, so I get a certain dollar per stream, or is it I did a class, so I get X number of dollars?
What we're trying to do is build the network so that we can create a model like Twitch where there can be more like revenue share tied to sponsorships or subscriptions. But right now, just to like create great content, it's just paid per stream. That's just as we like start.
And what's the model behind Fiveable? How does Fiveable make money? Is it a subscription service for the student?
Yeah, so far we've only really turned on one of our revenue streams, which is the subscription. And so what we did is we made the live streams free while they're live. And then what we sell are all the replays and study guides and slides, and all of those things are part of our library. And so we launched the first tier of that for $5 a month. And then we're right now gearing up to create an additional tier that is more about practice questions. So we kind of think of it as like community side of things is free. So, coming to the streams while they're live, interacting in our online community. And then the content piece is sort of the second step. And the third step is practice. And so kids want a way to practice questions, whether they're long form or like kind of trivia based. And that's what we're creating right now.
Are you going to get into SAT and ACT test prep?
Yeah. So we've done it a little bit, just like kind of testing it out. The students that we have right now, what we're trying to figure out is like what other spaces do they need support in? And the big areas are SATs, ACTs, and college admissions. And so throughout the next year, especially like next year over the summer and in the fall, I think we're going to do a lot more support on those spaces. For example, like bringing in college admissions counselors so that they can kind of interact and ask questions, doing like live streams about SATs so that they can see like, these are the things that I should study, just like we do with AP. We found that's something that kids really need because a lot of SAT prep right now is super expensive. And so how do we democratize that?
I see on your website that 92% of your students pass their AP exams. How else do you measure success or know that things are going well with Fiveable?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that we look at and what we're trying to like learn more about how to actually like measure this is just like the confidence that students have. We see this just like from like a qualitative area. Like at the beginning of a live stream, I might ask like, give me on a scale of 1 to 5, how comfortable do you feel with this? And usually they're they just kind of go on the lower side. They get really like nervous, like they feel unsure about what they know. And then once you take them through a live stream, even just like getting them to ask questions, like asking questions is not easy because you have to now admit that I don't know this thing. And so getting students to ask questions, getting them to interact with the streamer, with each other, by the end of the stream, we just see a much higher level of confidence. Last AP season, I felt like most of our streams in April and May were like 50% teaching and like 50% just like pep talks. It's like, this, you just need to like know and understand and believe that you know this. And just kind of building that up is really important to us. It's sort of the like social emotional learning space.
Are students anonymized on the platform when they're in?
Essentially. So they can put their real names, but they could put other names as well. And so that level of anonymity we've seen a lot of questions that you can tell that like a kid was hanging on to that for a while because, I can ask it now because we're online. No one knows who I am. And so that's been really helpful.
How big is this market? Like if Fiveable goes really well, what does that look like?
We just started with AP because it was measurable and standard and it's what I knew. But like we've kind of talked about, like expanding out to other parts of high school, college, really what I think this like in my mind, this market is just like all students, like at least in the high school space and college space. But there's a lot of kids in there that are struggling with a lot of the different facets of like being a good student right now, whether it's the skills that you need, like the reading and writing and the math skills that you need to have by the time you get into college, whether it's like time management and just like study skills, like how do you take notes, how do you study. There's a lot of like these layers that are kind of swirling around. And so for us, like we want to find a way to reach all students, and like, how do we get to a point where students say, okay, it's after school, I'm after my class, I need to study, I'm going to go to Fiveable, right? There's live streams happening. There's other content that I can look at. Like I need to build, I know I'm not good at this. I know I need help. And that's sort of our like vision of it.
How many students are opting for and maybe this is a percentage or a proportion, but for the subscription versus showing up live?
Yeah. So typically we end up converting about 6% of the live attendance each month to the membership. And so that's just right now, like in the fall. Part of like our learnings have just been AP is the most valuable in the spring. And so what we do in the fall and the summer is about like building students' grades. And in the future, we want to build in more of the other supports as well that they really are going to like gravitate to. And so just in this last few months, that's about the percentage that we've seen. In the spring, it jumps up a whole lot more.
Yeah. How do you think about the cyclical nature of this? Like, what does that mean for your business and cash flow, or like the people you have on staff? How does that all work with the seasonality of this?
So, I mean, like this is our second fall. And I think what we're learning is like, we have to make sure that in the spring, we make enough money to support the second half of the year. That's sort of at least what has to be true as long as we're only focused on AP. And then the other thing that we have to really think about is what other things can we provide in the summer and in the fall that can lead to revenue as well. Whether we're selling to schools then or bringing in sponsorships or offering different products. Like as we go forward, this is a big part of like what we need to think about and just like how we support kids all year round. But I just know that like the school year cycle is something that, every ed tech company has to kind of deal with. Like the summer is going to look different. Weekends, like even our traffic like kind of goes like up and down. Just, nobody's looking up homework on Saturdays. And so just like trying to be what students need when they need it and thinking really critically about in the school year, what is that, at any point.
Is it difficult to capture a new audience every spring? I kind of feel like these kids take their AP courses, they move on to college. Eventually you want to serve them as college students too. But now that you're serving high school students studying for AP, are they referring their younger friends to Fiveable? Are you going through schools directly? Like, what does it look to capture a new audience every year?
Yeah. So the thing is that now a lot of freshmen and sophomores take APs. And so far, our biggest class has been AP World History because of my experience in that. And that is mostly sophomores. And so what we found, that was last year. So this year, our biggest class is now AP US History. And so what's happened is that we're not necessarily capturing new audiences. We're actually keeping them. So we've built strong, AP programs for like human geography and for world history, which are usually taken in 9th and 10th grade. And then those students stay with us. And so, as we hit the spring, we're going to get a lot of kids that come back and then they tell their students or their friends, teachers tell their students. And so the biggest like growth mechanism for us has always been search and just like SEO. And so even for, students are going to come back, but then also we can reach other students too, because we know what they're going to search. And whether that's on YouTube or Google, if we can be in the top of mind, then they'll come check out our resources.
And are you paying for that search, or are you doing this organically?
Totally organic. So out of all of our traffic, I think like something like 90% of it is organic and the rest of it is like direct. And so we haven't really put anything into paid ads. Everything has been just like totally word of mouth or organic search.
That's amazing. When people do become subscription members, is that totally month to month and they pay for the few months leading up to AP, or do some people buy an annual subscription?
So in the fall, most people buy annual subscriptions because it's worth it. It's like $40 for the whole year. And now I have access to all these subjects. In the spring, more people will buy monthly. And so, some of the kids will get it for a few months and then they might pause it, over the summer or into next year. And so that's the trick, right? Is like, if we can get a kid to turn it on, how do we get them to keep it? And so even if this AP is done, we know over the summer there are certain things that they would want. And so that's sort of what we're thinking about.
How do you think about quality of streamers you have now and increasing that quality over time?
So when we look for streamers, we really look for teachers and students who kind of have this like it factor, right? Like that people talk about. And when you think about teachers, like there's always that one teacher at every school or two teachers that everybody wants to take a class with, right? Like they've figured it out. They know how to teach. They're really personable with kids. That's the person that we look for. And same with students. There's always that student that everybody wants help from, right? Like they're just really good at what they do and they're good at showing others. And so as we got a lot of people applying, like that's what we really looked for. And in the teachers, in the streamers that we have, they've just done some like really incredible things. So like we have the Massachusetts Teacher of the Year, we have YouTube influencers, we have just other like people who have worked on the exam before, graders. And so building up their streaming capacity has been a big part of this fall as well. And so we did a lot of training. We did like mock streams. They're learning different ways to teach live and sharing those things with each other so that they can each improve as well. And so as we grow, I think it's just about really codifying that, right? Like if we have if we can pinpoint this is what makes a good streamer, then we can kind of like lay out really good training for anybody that wants to come into stream and really scale that up.
So if I'm a student and I'm going to sign up for a annual subscription in the fall and I'm taking a push, I have a few options of people who I can follow along and stream with. Is that correct? An understanding?
Yeah.
How do I choose between those? Is there like a rating, like a Rate My Professors style rating? Or is there like, how do I know I want to go with Jeff and not Martha or whatever?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right now it's more based on just like what that person is streaming about rather than the person themselves. Building in ratings is something that we're going to do for this spring, but right now it's just been kind of like, well, this teacher is going to stream about practicing the DBQ, while as this teacher is just going to go over the American Revolution. And so do I need support in writing or do I need support in like understanding this content? And so that's how we sort of approached it so far, is like these are the things that we want to cover. We have the streamers that pick up different topics, but then over time people were having their favorites, right? So it's kind of like Peloton, right? Like people are going to go to who they want to talk to.
Right now there's this kind of you have a gatekeeper onboarding style where you're trying to find that person who has that it factor. Is this model sustainable, or is there any talk about having it be more of a user-generated content model where anyone can sign up to be a streamer and then you find out who's right over time?
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot. I think, at least for now, quality of content is super important. And like we would have to have just the right level of tech and support in order to make things open for everyone. I think there would be a lot of value in having anyone be able to stream or create content, because I think like I like trust in the, good of people. Like I think most people would create awesome things, but the issue right now for us while we're small is that it's just hard to sort of manage a huge influx of content. And so, and also like it's education. And so the quality of content is even more important than on some other social media sites. And so we've just been trying to figure out a balance between it, because I do want there to be a level of user generated content. And we have brought in just like more and more like content creators, like kind of writing things, but we haven't brought that to streaming quite yet. And so that's something that we're kind of trying to figure out.
Who owns the courses? Can streamers take their information elsewhere, or is this owned by Fiveable?
We own the content. So if they stream, then we own the video and slides and things. But we're kind of aligned to like the College Board course. So we're using the same like curriculum that is sort of like standard.
You said earlier that you've turned on this one stream of revenue, which is a subscription, but it kind of sounded like you're alluding to that there are other streams that you guys were looking towards. So what does that look like 3 years from now?
Yeah. So one that we're really looking towards is sponsored content. I know how valuable that's been for a lot of companies, and I can see a lot of potential for us with, especially just like building a network of high school students, then thinking about like who wants their attention, which is a lot of people. And so I think there's going to be a way for us to have colleges or universities creating sponsored content, other types of brands that are interested in that market. And so that's one that we're looking into for sure. And the other piece of it is just around like one, increasing the number of tiers that we have in our membership, but also providing some of these other tools too. Like there's other ways that we can support students that may not fit into a membership, but maybe something that we sell as like kind of a one-off. And that's kind of what we're thinking about now in terms of like, how do you create the best learning experience for students? Every kid is different. And so creating the perfect membership is not always easy. And so there may be other tools that may be useful.
How many people are on your team right now, and what do they do?
Yeah, so right now we've got 4 people that work full-time, including myself. So I'm really focused on just like the learning experience and then all the admin stuff. I've been raising money in the last few months, and because I'm like the teacher, yesterday I spent like 5 hours writing a study guide for the like Revolutionary Wars. So like I kind of go between like pitching, like on like last week I was pitching, and then this weekend I'm writing study guides. So that's sort of my world.
Just like every other founder that comes on Upside.
Exactly. Right. I'm kind of everywhere. And then we have Ton that is focused on SEO and growth, really just like thinking about how do we use content to grow, especially like with search. And then our 2 engineers, Austin and Aaron, they're focused on building the product. And so they're building out a lot of cool things right now. Right now they're working on like our community space so that we can launch in the next few weeks an online community so that kids can be interacting with each other, not just in the streams, but outside of the streams as well.
And I think I read somewhere that the 4 of you all live together. Is that right?
Yeah, 3 of us live together. So that's why Aaron was just coming out from the back before. But yeah, 3 of us live here. I'm like in the Fiveable house right now. We've lived together for almost a year now, which is crazy. But most of it, we all met like kind of online. And when I first was like way back when I was still living at my mom's house, I was like, I got to get out of here. And also I need a team, but how am I going to do this? And then I was inspired by what happened on the campaign. And so we had a bunch of people living in a house and it was really fun. And so I was like, let me try that. And I found people who were really inspired by that and willing to do it. And so it's been fun.
And why'd you end up in Milwaukee? Why is the Fiveable house in Milwaukee?
Yeah, the age-old question. We had done that generator program in Madison. We had moved to Madison last April. We were actually in Philly at that point and got into generator and we're like, sell it all, get it all in the car, and let's go to Wisconsin. We learned that you can return anything from IKEA within a full year, like fully built, doesn't matter. So hot tip. And so we moved out to Madison. We were doing the generator program for a couple of months. And then in June, we had to decide, like, where do we want to go? We can go anywhere. And we just decided, let's just stay. Let's get a spot in Milwaukee. We've now met so many people. I know you guys have talked to the folks at Generator before, and they've just been really helpful. And so I think the network that we built in doing Generator, it just didn't make sense to leave and have to go to a city and start over. It made sense to stay because now every time there's events that happen here, we get invited, we know people, we can have like press opportunities. It's just smaller. And so if we were in, Boston or New York, like that never would have happened.
This has been awesome, Amanda. What a crazy story, going from in the classroom feeling like you can't make it financially work to now having a house and a team and raising money for yourself and not a political candidate. Crazy change in just a few years' time.
Yeah. Sometimes I have to like remind myself that like I have done all of these things, and no matter what happens in the next few months, few years, whatever, like all of this was worth it because I like have come so far,
If people want to learn more about you or Fiveable after the show, where should they go?
Yeah, so you can check us out on our website at fiveable.me. We're streaming all the time throughout the week, so come through, share it with other students and teachers. And then we're also on every social media platform at Think Fiveable.
Hey listener, have you ever wanted to get a message in front of the Upside audience but weren't sure how to sponsor this show or weren't able to do a long-term sponsorship? Well, now you can just go to upside.fm/classifieds and let our audience know anything that's going on in your world, whether it's an event, an application, a special coupon or deal, or just letting them know who you are, what your company does. All you have to do is go to upside.fm/classifieds and you can place an ad on this show. That's upside.fm/classifieds. All right, Eric, we just spoke with Amanda of Fiveable. Where do you want to start today? You want to start talking about Amanda, the founder, the opportunity? Do you want to discuss the fact that you used a email instead of an email in the intro?
I think we can start with talking about Amanda, the founder. I'm just going to completely ignore your little slight there. So there's this idea that floats out there called founder product fit or founder market fit or whatever you want to call it. And it feels like Amanda has that in spades. The question, though, Jay, is does that matter?
I think it's kind of like wearing a suit to an interview. The suit's not going to get you the job, but not wearing it, this is a flawed analogy, absolutely. I think it does matter. I think it's a positive. It's the opposite of that problem, actually.
Hold up. What is your answer right now? Are you answering one way or the other? Are we keeping all of this or is this scratched? Also, I think you said and suit. I think you said and suit.
I think it's a positive. I think it's very much a net positive. What I was trying to say is it's definitely a pro. I don't think it's necessarily going to disqualify somebody from starting a successful company if they do not have this founder market fit. But I agree, coming from a background in education where she was teaching students AP courses to the point where her customers were coming to her asking her for a product, in essence, which is what Fiveable was birthed out of, I think is really, really positive. And where you might think it doesn't matter is, well, okay, this founder has founder product fit, but they've never done a business before. They never started a business before. They don't know business. Very clearly, she's learned very quickly how to start a company, hire a team, went through Beta Boom and Generator. So she's now surrounded by a community of people to support her. So I think it's very much a positive fact that she has this fit with her product and market.
Yeah, I feel like it fits very cleanly into, I feel like Amanda's approach so far fits very cleanly into the baker scenario. Have you read the E-Myth?
I haven't. It's on my to-do list. It's my to-read list, my reading list.
Your to-do list. Well, there's this idea that's pretty standard. It's a baker wants to start a business because the baker loves to bake. And then they realize that there's a lot of other stuff that goes on in the business. And they realize that 80% of their time is spent on things that aren't baking. So you can love to bake and then expand out and do those things really well. Or you can hire people to do those things really well and let you be a baker. Or you could run the business and hire more bakers to do the baking. So it feels like with this incredible growth in number of content producers that are on the platform now from 5 to 95, Amanda has stepped back and said, I'm not just going to be the content person. This is a bigger vision and I have a content background, but it's not all me.
Still baking though, which I struggle with this because part of me loves that. Part of me loves that the founder is still in the trenches, creating the content, interfacing directly with the customers, with the users, with her own content. And part of me, probably the more investor-minded part of me, says that's probably not the highest leveraged use of your time, CEO, but there's got to be so much value in interacting directly with those users, understanding how this new medium of live streaming education is helping them, how they're responding to it, what their needs are, because the whole thing started in the first place from students going to Amanda saying, we need help with our AP preparation.
I'd push back on that a little bit if I was a early stage investor. I think, well, I don't actually know who says the quote or who's famous for it, but our friend Andy Sparks at Holloway says, when you're young, you need to do things that don't scale. And that's probably a more generic quote, and I'm just giving him credit for it.
It's Paul Graham.
There you go. Probably should have given it to Paul Graham. Sorry, PG. And I think Amanda said it best when she said, when you're in front of students, you're on stage and it's 30 minutes. And when you're on stage, you know this because you've done some improv, like you're getting constant feedback from an audience. And I think that that's definitely invaluable, and it's something that doesn't scale right now, but it's going to be invaluable for the growth of the company for Amanda to have those experiences.
What I don't want to understate is this growth from 5 to 95 over the course of 2 years in really 2 cycles. That is a level of ambition and vision that is very quick in my mind. To go and say, okay, we just did year 1. We had 5 teachers and we probably taught hundreds or thousands of students. And to say before next year, I want a team of 95 is a big, big undertaking and just boom of people that you're managing and supporting. And for a lot of first-time founders, I don't see that type of jumping with 2 feet in out of the gate. And for her to not be burned out by the first season and having 5 people that she's managing, but instead continue to grow the team, I think is a very, very positive indication of Amanda as a founder.
I think the structuring of it was very important. It wasn't just, here's 95 people underneath me. It was, we're going to do what she called department heads. So she has people that are kind of reporting up to her. And I think that is a much more scalable way to grow as opposed to trying to deal with 94 other humans.
So let's turn our attention to the business now in Fiveable, which I'm going to continue to try and enunciate. Do you know where the name Fiveable comes from, Eric? We didn't ask, but I have a pretty good guess.
I want to hear your guess.
My guess is when you are taking an AP exam, it's graded from 1 to 5. And so I'm guessing they're saying, using our support, those AP courses are Fiveable for you, dear user.
Yeah, that was my guess too. I was hoping you had something completely off the wall.
So what do you think about Fiveable, the business? What stuck out to you?
Well, the first thing I thought was the business model itself makes a lot of sense. I thought the price point seemed light, but then I thought, oh, well, it's high school students. So, of course, it's going to feel light compared to what I'm expecting. But then I thought back to my days when I did a SAT prep course through, I forget which, maybe it was Princeton Review. And I don't remember the exact price on that, but it was definitely in the hundreds of dollars. And I was a high school student. So there is something to be said for a higher price point. It feels cheap right now. That was my first kind of take on the business model. They're still early, so it could change. What about you? What stuck out to you?
I agree. I thought the price was very accessible, probably too accessible. And not that you don't want people to be able to access it, but since it is a freemium model and you do make the content available for free as a stream, I thought that $5 a month was leaving a lot on the table because, yeah, high school students, but I would guess that there are a lot of parents who are actually paying for this subscription. And again, you don't want to make this inaccessible for people in lower socioeconomic status and continue to kind of perpetuate the problems with education. But if you're preparing for AP courses, your audience probably has a higher price threshold than that, was my first thought.
Did you take any AP courses in high school?
Yeah, I took a few. And the thing is about AP courses, anyone can take an AP exam. You don't actually have to take the course at your high school to be able to take an AP exam. So part of me likes how this really makes it accessible to take AP courses and do well on them if your school doesn't have them. Now, that takes some level of awareness for the student or the family to know you can do that. But our high school only had a handful, and I didn't realize that I could have taken more if I prepared for them myself.
I didn't know that rule either. I probably would have taken more AP exams.
I was skeptical on the live streaming side of this because it's just hard to do live well without already having a pretty big audience. Because think of all the things that just have to go right to get the right customer aware of you, available at the time that you're live streaming on the live stream. But as Amanda described more, the model of it's free if you show up for the live streams, you can pay for the replays, you can pay for the study guides. I liked it more and more because the incentives are really good. You're incentivizing people to show up for the live streams. You're giving them this urgency to show up and commit to their own education and do it live, where she says people have really great outcomes communicating directly with the professor and other students. And that's a way to start to grow your live audience. So I'm sold on that. Also, when she said that, a lot of times the pre-recorded or the pre-made materials become outdated year to year, that made even more sense to do it live. It's just sort of a treadmill, and it seems like a treadmill that they're committed to doing and doing well. And it sounds like also there's enough supply on the teacher educator side to make that happen.
I'm super bullish on the live stream space in general. I think like it's one of the larger kind of macro themes I'm really interested in right now. I think the rise of kind of live streaming in esports, and you're seeing live streaming in all kinds of other areas, is going to make it more and more comfortable for people over time. One place I'm really interested in, and I don't know actually know if I have the phrasing right here, is co-streaming, but essentially you're watching a basketball game, and instead of listening to the announcers that they put on CBS, anybody can jump on and like announce a basketball game. Kind of far off in the future and irrelevant to this, but I think that the idea of live streaming and of having different options of people to choose from, as opposed to one really well curated pre-packaged plan, gives people a lot more choice, and also is going to become more comfortable over time. So I had almost zero hesitancies about the live streaming perspective, especially when you have all those back-end features when you're a paid subscriber.
The one shadow I had was I was a little fuzzy on the cash flow dynamics, not the model itself, but how the cash flow actually works. So I did a quick look at a job posting they had for streamers. It says they pay $25 to $75 per stream. It sounds like the streamers are doing 2 to 10 streams per month because they're 60 minutes on average, which is a lot of money going out to 95 streamers when your subscription is $5 per month and converting at about 6% of live attendance. It sounds like it's probably covering, and that will get better as they grow. To give the flip side of what concerned me there, the thing that was super, super positive to me was that 90% of their traffic is organic growth. That is an awesome, awesome engine that should only strengthen over time, especially if they have kind of a first mover advantage here. That is really, really good for bringing people into the top of the funnel and capturing new audiences even if it's 3 to 4 years. So ostensibly, since this is very scalable, I think that all works out. And maybe they'll even be able to raise the rates they're giving to streamers, but I just didn't get a full sense of the unit economics on the call.
I'd agree with that. I think that the unit economics need some work, and that's why the price point was the first thing that stuck out to me. That being said, it's not like they're spending thousands of dollars to get $40 in revenue. So they're not super under bad unit economics, growth at all costs type of methodology. It's just tweaking at this point, not complete overhaul, which makes me feel more comfortable in the stickiness of the business going forward. Because if you take a AP class as a freshman in high school and you pass, and it's because you use Fiveable, first, you're going to increase that organic search side of things by telling all of your classmates about it. And second, you're absolutely going to do Fiveable for your next class and your junior year and your senior year. And I know we talked about the runway kind of running out in high school, but that gets to the bigger opportunity point. So I'll let you kind of take any stabs at that take before I jump into the opportunity.
Just to add on to it, I know they're going direct to consumer here, but if I'm a high school teacher or high school administrator or high school guidance counselor, I know that I want my kids to pass, and anything that I can give them to make them even more equipped to pass, like there's no reason that a school wouldn't be supportive of this program themselves, because they're still ultimately going to show that our students passed AP or got these scores at AP, even if those students were using Fiveable quite a bit. So I thought that was a really good alignment of incentives too.
So when we look at the opportunity, right now we're focused on high school students. I don't think that's the entire market for this space. I don't think this is where Fiveable will end. I think ACT, SAT prep is the next kind of big jump for them because it's the same kind of body of students and there's higher conversion rates. But when I look down the road and I look at evaluating this opportunity and I say, okay, if it works in high school and it works for test prep, then what's to say it can't work for certain college courses that maybe are more standardized, or what I find to be the most interesting, which is professional certifications. The price point on all of those things are so high. I mean, there are people who pay thousands of dollars to get professional certifications or study for the bar or whatever it is. There's all of this kind of certification world that's becoming more and more important as a college degree gets more and more diluted. So people are willing to pay more and more for those letters after their name, that I could see people paying for something like this if it had a larger chance of kind of returning a positive score in passing. Some areas that I'm a little hesitant on in that model looking forward are just the cost of content, because you're in the core curriculum for high school. That's a commodity. Everyone has access to that core curriculum. But as you move up, the reason Kaplan is able to charge for the CFA and Princeton Review is able to charge for SAT, ACT prep is because they've developed a methodology and content library that took a lot of time and honing over years. So building those curriculums, I think, is going to be important. But when we look at the opportunity size in general, if they can kind of move through high school, which is a big opportunity in itself, into these other areas of higher ed and professional certifications and test prep using this kind of methodology. I mean, Kaplan is doing $1.5 billion a year in revenues. So it's a large space. And I did see a stat that they have 171,000 people who take online courses.
The other thing that concerns me about going into these growth spaces, which I agree have huge market opportunity, market potential. I think the market for this business is very big, so we don't need to spend a lot of time there. What concerns me a little bit is the name that we spent a little bit of time in this deal memo talking about. The brand suggests that it is very AP aligned. Is Fiveable flexible enough to move into professional certifications? Will people read too much into that name or not? I think there's a little bit of a risk there, but not unovercomable, and maybe you don't need to rebrand to make it more flexible.
Less of a concern for me, but I see where you're coming from. So Jay, what do you want to see in the next 6 to 18 months from Fiveable?
One more thing I want to speak to before I get into that question. Amanda mentioned, yeah, they have 95 streamers, but they have 4 full-time employees, which is a very small and strong and I think appropriately designed team. You have Amanda running things and kind of wearing all the hats that a CEO and founder does. She said Tom is running SEO and growth, and they have 2 engineers. Very lean team. This doesn't strike me as much of an engineering or like proprietary tech play as some companies are, so they can probably stay fairly lean for a while, and to have a dedicated member, 25% of your team, focused on this SEO and growth role that we said is a really strong point for them. I thought that was just a very positive mark on the team at this point. You asked about 6 to 18 months. I would like to get more unit economics and what that growth has looked like over the years. She mentioned, we need to make enough in the spring to pay for the second half of the year, but that also puts this little bit of a pressure on you every year to make sure that you are doing the spring as well as possible. So what does growth look like in year 3? What is the plan for growth in year 4? That's the type of thing I'm looking for 6 to 18 months from now.
When you say plan for growth, are you talking about revenue growth, or are you talking about growth of, what are you looking at there?
Yeah, I'm talking revenue growth. I'm talking about user growth. When we did Tixers, for example, every year I realized that I missed the boat on the holiday season because I just didn't prepare for it enough. And so in this space, being as cyclical and seasonal as it is, you could really make strides or leave a lot on the table based on your planning for that season and what it looks like. So I'm just looking to see, what does that plan look like year over year? What does success look like? Because I'm not sure. I didn't get a sense for like what our metric is of this is a successful spring. Is it continue to grow out the courses? They have 15 now. How many are possible? How many streamers do they want? How are they going to get them? How many students do they need to have on the platform to support those streamers? That's the type of thing I was a little unsure on.
Yeah, I think when I look at 6 to 18 months, I want to focus mostly on the streamer side. I want to see how the streamers are being rated. Are people flocking towards certain streamers? What does that mean for the platform in terms of growth? She mentioned that the streamers have kind of other channels as well. So they might be YouTube influencers, or they might be on a site called Teachers Pay Teachers, which I haven't heard about before. And to me, I want to know what does that streamer makeup look like? Because that's essentially your talent here. And two very large streamers, Ninja and I'm forgetting the other guy's name, just moved from Twitch to Mixer. And with them, they brought thousands of subs. So this becomes a kind of a talent game in the long run. And I want to know how that talent is evolving since the underlying information is a commodity.
All right, guys, we'd love to hear what you think about this. You can tweet at us, as always, at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm and let us know what we missed. If you know a great founder or investor that we should talk to on the show, you can email us there as well. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll talk to you next week. That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's guest, so shoot us an email at hello@upside.fm or find us on Twitter at UpsideFM. We'll be back here next week at the same time talking to another founder in our quest to find upside outside of Silicon Valley. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please email us or find us on Twitter and let us know. And if you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way in helping us spread the word and continue to help bring high-quality guests to the show. Eric and I decided there were a couple things we wanted to share with you at the end of the podcast, and so here we go. Eric Hornung and Jay Klaus are the founding parties of the Upside podcast. At the time of this recording, we do not own equity or other financial interest in the companies which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinions of Duff & Phelps LLC and its affiliates, Unreal Collective LLC and its affiliates, or any entity which employ us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. We have not considered your specific financial situation nor provided any investment advice on this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. Never mind, bro, that can't be matched. I'm lighting it on fire, used to run victory laps, and still I'm not even tired. It's all about the timing, yeah, that's what they say. Well, I'ma keep on rhyming.